Ever try to, like, navigate a grocery store with a toddler who's melting down? It's like,
Yeah.
and then you're like, fine, 5 more minutes, the dang tablet, just please.
We've all been there.
It's the digital age, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, parenting and technology,
Yeah.
well, that's why we're here. We're doing a deep dive today on how to balance, the good and the bad of tech, especially for our kids.
Absolutely. It's a question we get all the time.
And we did our homework, research articles, expert opinions, even dove into some of those online parent groups everyone's talking about these days.
Trying to cut through the noise and get to what's actually helpful.
Exactly. Practical tips, but also like those aha moments where it all clicks.
Because it's not just about the technology itself. It's about understanding why it matters to you as parents, the values you want to bring into your family's digital life.
Love that. Okay, so first things first, the good stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get caught up in the worries about screen time, right?
Yeah.
But tech can be pretty amazing for kids and parents.
It's true. And it's evolving so fast. I mean, think about it. Remember those old school flashcards for learning?
Yeah.
Now there are apps for that. And they're actually fun, like genuinely engaging.
It's sneaky learning.
Totally.
Yeah.
And these apps are using like game-based learning to make even complicated things interesting. Have you heard of Dragonbox?
I don't think so.
Kids learn fractions by playing it, or building a world in Minecraft, but they're actually internalizing history timelines at the same time.
Wow. See, I love hearing about that stuff because it's
Yeah.
easy to just focus on the negatives. And it's not just for the kids either. I was reading this article about how video calls have been a game changer, especially for working parents. It's not just saying hi to grandma anymore.
Right, it's dinner together, even if you're miles apart.
Or reading a bedtime story when work takes you away from home.
Exactly. It's about maintaining those crucial family connections no matter the distance.
Which is so important. And speaking of connection, let's talk about those online parenting communities. I saw a study that really highlighted the app Peanut. It connects moms based on their kids' ages. And
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
so it seems like that's the new village, right? Getting advice and support online 24/7.
Whether you're like a brand new parent trying to figure out a sleep schedule or dealing with teenagers, there's a group out there for you. It's comforting, knowing you're not alone. But, okay, we've got to address the elephant in the room. Or maybe it's more like the phone in the playroom.
You mean?
That nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, our kids are spending a little too much time on screens.
It's a valid concern. And it's not just parents saying it. The research is backing it up.
Exactly. It's a real thing. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, they're not mincing words.
No, they're not.
Their research found that too much screen time, especially for little kids, it can actually impact how their brains develop. Specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for attention span, making decisions, even social skills.
It's huge. And it's not just the amount of screen time, but the type. Passively scrolling through social media. It's not the same as using an educational app, huge difference. And that actually ties into another concern that kept popping up in the research. How too much screen time might be affecting kids' social skills.
Mm.
There was this one study, they observed that kids who are constantly glued to screens, they might struggle more with reading those little social cues.
Like facial expressions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or body language. And that's crucial for real-life interactions.
Absolutely. It's like they're missing those opportunities to learn empathy, how to navigate the back and forth of face-to-face communication.
Which is so important, not just as kids, but throughout life.
Mm.
Making eye contact, reading the room, all of that. But there's another big one, right? The worry that keeps parents up at night.
You mean?
The internet can be a scary place. What if our kids see something they're not ready for?
It's a valid fear.
Or worse, what if they become targets of cyberbullying, which can be devastating to their self-esteem?
It's a complex issue, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But the more we understand, the better equipped we are to guide our kids toward a healthy relationship with technology.
It can feel overwhelming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we actually make sure our kids are using tech in a healthy way?
That's where the good news comes in. A lot of the research we looked at offered really practical strategies for parents, not just vague ideas, but like actual tools and techniques.
Okay, because that's what we need. Less doom scrolling, more doing something.
Exactly. One thing that really resonated with me was this idea of age-appropriate content. It sounds simple enough, but...
Well, and we've all seen those app descriptions,
Yeah.
right? Suitable for all ages.
Yeah.
Right? Right.
And then you download it and you're like, nope.
Exactly. So, what can we do?
The research suggested starting with those App Store age ratings, They're not perfect, but at least it's a framework.
It's a starting point, right?
Yes, like a first line of defense in the App Store jungle.
Love that analogy.
Yeah,
Okay, but speaking of defense, screen time. That's the big one, right?
definitely a hot topic.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics, they actually give some pretty specific guidelines. For little kids, ages 2 to 5, they suggest no more than an hour a day.
1 hour, which I know it can seem impossible for some families, but the key is quality over quantity. And for older kids, instead of being the screen police, it's about more of a partnership.
A partnership. So instead of no more screens, it's more like,
Exactly. Like, okay, we have this much time for screens today. How do we want to use it? Creating a media plan together.
that's interesting, because then it teaches them how to prioritize.
Right. Exactly. And it takes some pressure off of parents.
Huge. So instead of just screen time, what are some things we should be encouraging?
Well, there was that study about unstructured playtime, especially for those developing brains.
So important.
Right. Reading, playing outside, art projects.
Don't forget board games.
Yes. Board games are making a comeback. It's that face-to-face interaction, the problem solving, the cooperation.
And honestly, it's fun. We get so caught up in the digital stuff, we forget how much we enjoy those simple things.
Totally. And speaking of modeling good behavior, that's another big one.
Oh, you mean like we can't tell our kids to get off their phones if we're constantly on ours?
It's about practicing what we preach, right?
Yeah.
Putting our devices away during dinner, maybe reading a physical book instead of scrolling before bed.
Being present, right? Mentally and physically.
Yes. Choosing those moments of real connection over the endless scroll.
But we don't have to completely cut out technology either, right?
Exactly. There was this study about parents who use technology with their kids. Sharing those experiences, it can actually strengthen those family bonds.
So instead of just being the screen time monitor, we become like co-explorers.
Exactly. Finding those cool educational apps, watching a documentary together.
That's awesome. See, I love hearing about this stuff.
Yeah.
But I know we've got more research to dive into.
We do. And this next part is really interesting. It looks at some specific studies about the effects of technology on kids. There were some real eye-openers.
Eye-opening research, huh? I'm kind of nervous to hear this now.
Oh, it's not all scary stuff, I promise. What I found fascinating is that it's not about ditching technology altogether. It's about understanding those screen time recommendations we hear about, like what's the why behind them?
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
So what did the research actually find?
Well, there was this 2019 study from the World Health Organization, and they really focused on physical activity, especially for the littlest ones, kids under 5. They actually recommend less than an hour a day of sedentary screen time for that age group.
Which, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. Toddlers are like little balls of energy. They want to move, explore.
Exactly. They're hardwired for that. And the research suggests that when they're spending too much time in front of a screen, it could actually be holding them back in other areas, like their gross motor skills, coordination, that kind of thing.
So it's not just the screen time itself, it's what they're not doing during that time.
Yes. Instead of like digging in the mud or building a fort, they're glued to a tablet.
Right, exactly.
And it's not just the little kids either. There was this really interesting study from the American Psychological Association, and it was all about social media's impact on teenagers.
Okay, yeah, social media is a whole different ballgame. I mean, it's how they connect with their friends, express themselves, but it also has a kind of dark side, right?
Absolutely. And that's what the research found. Too much social media for teenagers, it can actually increase their risk of anxiety and depression.
Oh, wow. Which is heartbreaking, but
Yeah.
I get it. You're constantly comparing yourself to others, worried about what people think of you.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. And it's easy to fall into those traps, feeling like you're not good enough. Or even worse, becoming the target of cyberbullying. It's like this whole other layer of social stress that older generations just didn't have to deal with.
So then what do we do? How do we help our kids, especially teenagers, deal with this stuff without, like, freaking out ourselves?
Well, communication is key. That's something that came up over and over in the research. It's not about banning social media outright. It's about having those open, honest conversations with our teens about the potential risks.
Talking to them about cyberbullying, about setting healthy boundaries.
Exactly. And maybe even more importantly, modeling those healthy habits ourselves. Do we really need to be on our phones at the dinner table? Or constantly checking social media when we're with them? It's about being present,
Being present.
Yeah.
Showing them that there's a whole world out there beyond the screen.
Yes. That real-life connection, genuine interaction, that's where it's at.
So it sounds like finding that balance is key.
It really is. Because technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for, well, not so good.
It's true. And as parents, it's our job to help our kids learn how to use that tool in a healthy way, to teach them how to benefit from all the amazing things technology has to offer without letting it, take over their lives.
And to remember that it's an ongoing conversation. What works for one family or even one kid at a certain age might not work for another. It's about being flexible and adapting as they grow.
That's such a good point. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway here is you got this. You've got the power to create a tech-balanced environment that works for your family, your values.
That's right. Don't be afraid to try new things. See what sticks.
And you don't have to do it alone. Talk to other parents, share your struggles, celebrate your successes. We're all in this together, figuring out this whole digital parenting thing one step at a time.
That's the beauty of it, right? We're all learning as we go.